inside the alleged coup network targeting Ibrahim Traoré. Hello everyone, and welcome back. What does it mean when a government says it has not only stopped a coup, but exposed the entire network behind it? And what happens when those accused appear on national television, naming names, tracing money, and describing how close a country came to collapse? In early January 2026, Burkina Faso announced that security services had dismantled what officials described as a coordinated assassination and coup plot targeting Captain Ibrahim Traoré. The claims were sweeping: cross-border coordination, financial backing from outside the Sahel, and a plan designed to paralyze the state's response before it could react. Supporters say this was a decisive moment, a generational break with the past. Critics urge caution, pointing to unanswered questions and the risks of politicized narratives. Tonight, we'll examine what authorities say they uncovered, why this episode matters beyond Burkina Faso, and how it fits into a broader struggle over power, legitimacy, and the future of the Sahel. Stay with me. According to Burkina Faso's security officials, the alleged plot scheduled for January 3rd was not improvised. It was layered. The first phase, they say, aimed to remove key figures at the top of the state. The second phase focused on delaying any rapid response by targeting critical capabilities, particularly aerial surveillance and coordination. The final objective was to create confusion long enough for the country to be pushed back into instability. From a security perspective, this structure matters. Modern coups do not rely on mass mobilization alone. They rely on speed, systems, and timing. Disrupt leadership, slow the response, and the balance can tip quickly. That is why authorities emphasize the alleged intent to neutralize specific command functions before anything else. Officials named Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, ousted in 2022 and now living in exile, as the alleged coordinator. The government claims he operated from outside the country, using encrypted messaging platforms to recruit disgruntled officers and coordinate logistics. Funding, they allege, was channeled through civilian intermediaries, with money traced to sources outside Burkina Faso. At the time of reporting, those external accusations had not been publicly addressed by the governments named. These are serious allegations, and they immediately raise two questions. First, how much evidence exists to substantiate the claims? Second, why frame this as more than a single incident? The answer lies in Burkina Faso's recent history. Since 2022, Captain Ibrahim Traoré has governed in an environment defined by insecurity, political rivalry, and rapid change. His rise followed public anger over deteriorating safety and the perception that old approaches had failed. Once in office, his government moved decisively, distancing from France, reshaping partnerships, deepening ties with new allies, and joining Mali and Niger to form the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Supporters see these moves as an overdue assertion of sovereignty. Critics see accelerated consolidation of power. Human rights groups have raised concerns about restrictions on dissent, pressure on media, and the narrowing of political space. The government counters that extraordinary threats require unity and firm action, and that division only benefits those seeking to destabilize the state. This tension frames how the alleged plot is being interpreted. Authorities have said this was not an isolated attempt. They argue it fits a pattern of repeated efforts to reverse the current direction of the country. Numbers cited in public discourse vary, underscoring a key challenge. In high-pressure environments, information is contested, and narratives harden quickly. One element emphasized by officials was the money trail. Investigators claim to have traced roughly 70 million CFA francs through cross-border channels. What stands out in the official account is not only the source of funds, but what happened after the money arrived. Authorities allege that the network fractured internally, with participants diverting funds for personal use. In the government's telling, this internal corruption weakened discipline and exposed the plot to detection. If accurate, that detail speaks to a broader point. Networks built on grievance and cash rather than shared purpose often unravel under scrutiny. They lack cohesion, they leak, and they leave trails. Security services claim they followed those trails for weeks, monitoring meetings, mapping contacts, and identifying roles. Arrests reportedly took place roughly an hour before the alleged operation was set to begin. Officials frame this timing as deliberate. allowing the network to reveal itself fully before moving in, rather than disrupting it prematurely. That claim of intelligence-led patience has become central to the government's narrative. It suggests a state confident enough to wait, gather evidence, and expose not just individuals but an entire structure. Whether that confidence is warranted depends on verification that remains incomplete. Another dimension of the story is regional. Authorities say coordination and support extended beyond Burkina Faso, involving safe locations and intermediaries in neighboring countries. This has sparked calls from supporters for extradition requests and formal diplomatic engagement, steps that, at the time of reporting, had not yet been publicly announced. These regional implications matter. Burkina Faso does not operate in isolation. It is part of a tightly linked Sahelian environment where events in one country reverberate quickly across borders. The AS itself is built on the idea that security and stability must be coordinated, or they will fail. Beyond security, the government has framed this episode as generational change. Officials and aligned commentators contrast those accused, described as part of an older elite, with the rise of newer forces, particularly the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP. The promotion of VDP leadership alongside the public exposure of alleged plotters has been presented as symbolic, an old order losing influence while a new one consolidates. This symbolism resonates with many young Burkinabe. Traoré's message of dignity, self-reliance, and national ownership speaks to a generation that feels excluded by past arrangements. For them, the alleged foiling of a coup is not just about security. It is about protecting a direction they believe is finally theirs. Yet symbolism cuts both ways. Public confessions and televised statements can rally support, but they also raise concerns about due process and the politicization of justice. In polarized environments, each revelation is interpreted through pre-existing beliefs. Supporters see proof, skeptics see performance. The role of media further complicates the picture. Pan-African outlets have provided detailed coverage of the allegations, while many international outlets have reported the claims cautiously, emphasizing that accusations remain unverified. This divergence feeds a wider debate about information power, who frames events, and whose framing becomes dominant. For outside observers, the central issue is not choosing sides. It is understanding stakes. If the government's account is broadly accurate, then Burkina Faso has demonstrated improved intelligence capacity and coordination at a moment of intense pressure. That would strengthen deterrence and reinforce the AES narrative of collective resilience. In a nation with a long memory of coups, the future depends on more than exposing a network. It depends on building a system strong enough that networks lose their appeal. Thank you for watching.